everybody, my name is Kat and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things horror, and today we are discussing, of course, Lisa Frankenstein. I don't have like the black sunglasses that she has in the film. I have these like pink ones that still kind of fit the aesthetic, but they're also like reflective, so you're just going to be seeing the camera the whole time. So I did not get to see this movie opening weekend, although it seems like not many people saw it opening weekend, but I did have a chance to finally get to see it last night. And I will say Lisa Frankenstein was at the top of like my most anticipated horror films of 2024. I'm sure like many of you, I am a huge fan of Jennifer's Body. I have always been a stan of Jennifer's Body, even when everyone else on the planet hated it. So I was excited to go into this film and see what Diablo Cody had cooked up for us this time. And I know that not everyone is a fan of Diablo Cody. I do agree with some criticisms that, you know, her humor is kind of the same in everything that she does. I know people find it like kind of cringy millennial. Is she a millennial? I think so. But as someone who is also a cringy millennial, I just really enjoy the stuff that she puts out. And I went in with pretty, modest expectations because I already knew going into it, like it was not going to be at the same level of Jennifer's Body. This is a PG-13 film. One of my complaints with this is that I wish they had bumped it up to an R rating like Jennifer's Body. I know they want to market it to a younger audience. That being said, I was surprised with what they were able to get away with and what they did show and what they did talk about. Like, it is a pretty hard PG-13. But yes, it is not Jennifer's Body. But I still enjoyed it for what it was. I still had a lot of fun with this film. I really wanted to come on here and do my own rendition of Can't Fight This Feeling Anymore. But obviously, YouTube copyright, I can't do that. I think it's only a few seconds they give you. So this is a bit of a weird movie to review because on the one hand, I did really enjoy it. I liked this movie a lot. I had a lot of fun while I was watching it. I was so into it, the campiness, the aesthetics. On the other hand, man, what a mess of a narrative. I felt like they really dropped the ball, especially in the last 10 minutes, the way that they choose to wrap this film up. It was so disappointing, and I'll talk more about that later in the video, but I'm trying to keep it spoiler free for right now. But yeah, man, that third act hit. It wasn't even the third act. It was literally like just the last 10 minutes. And the thing is, right, like it's not like the narrative is anything that groundbreaking from the very beginning. It's a pretty messy film throughout. However, the thing that holds it up is its campiness factor. And so if you're into that, and I know not everyone is going to be, but if you are, then you can kind of just strap yourself in and go on the ride that it's taking you. Also, I think Catherine Newman, who plays Lisa, like she knocks it out of the park. She is so good in this role. I just had so much fun watching her and kind of watching her character go through these bizarre situations. She is playing that stereotypical girl that we see in like these 80s teen comedies, right? Where she's supposed to be like the weirdo, the loner, but she's also like insanely beautiful and very hyper feminine at the same time. She's a girl that's like going into graveyards and, writing poetry, which kind of feels odd in today's time because I feel like all of those activities are now like the cool thing to do on like TikTok, right? Like all those like weird aesthetics, like what is it? Like the hot girl reading aesthetic. We now have like Taylor Swift, who's going to be releasing an album all about being a poet. Now being like the weird girl that writes poetry and is into like weird books and movies, like that's now like the cool thing to do. Like you're now an it girl if you're like part of that aesthetic. And the film does make jokes about that as well. And yeah, speaking of the 1980s, listen, as someone that loves the 1980s, like I've always loved 80s films and music and pop culture. I mean, how could you not? I think I've talked about this before, but I was like the kid in 8th grade that was just listening to 80s music, just watching 80s movies. I had like a big cassette player that I brought with me while everyone else in my class had their like iPods. Like I tried to make my life at that time, like in the 1980s. This was like the mid 2000s. I was just like rejecting anything modern. I was trying to make my life just the 1980s. More weird girl behavior that is now suddenly trendy and cool. But as someone that loves the 80s, and I very much consider myself an 80s enthusiast, I'm just getting burnt out. I'm getting burnt out on all of the modern films and TV shows that want to take place in the 80s. They're trying to have that like 80s aesthetic, but it's not like actual 1980s. It's like these weird like synth wave, very bright poppy colors. It's the cultural imagination. And I'm not saying like that's a bad thing, especially in this film, because as I already said, I really enjoyed the aesthetics of it. But I feel like storytellers, filmmakers, like we need to kind of get over this obsession of the 80s. Let's just try being in a different decade for a little bit. But again, the colors are fun. The aesthetic is fun. I really love the aesthetic of her bedroom. We spent quite a bit of time with her in her room, and I loved it. I loved how girly it was. I loved the pink walls and all of the lights. And she has old horror movie posters everywhere. Like, it was just an aesthetic that spoke to my soul. It spoke to me personally. As someone that loves to be a girly girl, but also loves the horror and the macabre, I love when those two things can come together. So I was really into that. She also has like a tapestry of A Trip to the Moon, that silent film, the Malaise brothers' Trip to the Moon, right, where you have like the moon figure with like the spaceship stuck in its eye. As a film nerd girl, I loved that. I was like, where do I buy that? So yes, visually it spoke to me. I really liked the character of Lisa as well. Obviously, it's not speaking to me in the same way that something like Jennifer's Body did when I saw it as a teenager, obviously being older now. I remember the teen angst phase, but it was such a long time ago now. There's so much distance to it that I don't really connect with it when I see it on screen anymore. But I know that teenager Kat would have loved this movie, so it really connected to like my inner teenage self. Overall, enjoying it, but like I said, definitely a lot of narrative problems. Basically, you have a story in which you have Lisa, who's a character, and throughout the film, she goes through some pretty big personality changes. And I don't think the film did a really good job in the first act of kind of setting up like this inner darkness, this kind of inner rage that she has. I mean, she's definitely presented as like sad girl, but again, not necessarily like vengeful or rageful. I mean, minor spoiler, but there's like a scene in the beginning where she breaks a mirror out of frustration. So I guess that. The problem is that her switching feels very abrupt. It's pretty quick from like normal teenage girl to, again, minor spoilers, normal teenage girl to like psycho. And they don't really explain why or like what she's really getting out of it. And then the ending, again, just like big no for me. But I think the problem with the ending is that it doesn't feel like the film has a clear message or a clear theme that it's trying to say. It sets up several different threads throughout the narrative, but then doesn't actually like tie anything together. And the message that it is presenting with you at the end is pretty bleak, in my opinion, and just not satisfying. Last night I was walking out of the theater and I was waiting for my Uber and just kind of mulling over the ending and trying to figure out what it was trying to say. And I was just like, what are you saying, movie? What is the message here? What lessons did the characters learn throughout this journey? I feel like we have this innate thing in our storytelling where we just kind of naturally use story as a way of, if not giving like life lessons, then again, just like kind of touching on these universal themes, whether it's love or family or friendship. And the film definitely touches on those as well. There's like big themes around love here, but like, again, I don't know what it's saying. And it feels like characters are getting away with being awful, and that's like cool and romantic. So at this point, I'm going to get into spoilers and just talk about the ending. I mean, this is a film where I feel like you know already if you want to go see it or not. And if you're into Diablo Cody, if you're into like the campy humor, then yes, you'll probably find something in here to enjoy about it. This film is very much Heathers meets like Tim Burton meets American Psycho or something. So if that sounds appealing to you, then I think you'll find something in this film to enjoy. But yes, going into spoilers and talking about the ending. So you have the story arc with Lisa in which you have the creature, this guy that came back from the dead, and he finds Lisa because, again, she's hanging out in graveyards and she's always hanging out at his like gravestone and like giving him gifts and making sure like the area around his gravestone is clean and like always talking to him. They have an innate connection. So when he comes back from the dead and he's coming back, he's missing like body parts. And so they start going on a killing spree and pretty much killing everyone in Lisa's life that she doesn't like or has some sort of conflict with, and taking their body parts to put on the dead guy. So it's one of those things where like in the second act of the movie, you're realizing like, oh, okay, Lisa and the creature are actually the bad guys here, right? And Lisa is enjoying killing these people. She becomes much more confident and extroverted with every kill that she does. And I thought this was interesting. I thought this was an interesting character arc, and it was definitely a different way for the story to go than what my expectations were going into it. Again, very much feeling like Heathers, right? Where you have Winona Ryder and Christian Slater, and they're like killing everyone in the school.
I just killed my best friend.
And your worst enemy.
Same difference.
But the difference with Heathers is that by the end of the film, you have Winona Ryder's character realizing that like what she's been doing with this guy is not good. And then the third act of the film is her figuring out how to stop Christian Slater. So it's not like the characters get to revel in taking the lives of others. They are the protagonists, but they're not getting a heroic ending. Whereas here with Lisa Frankenstein, you have a scenario in which neither Lisa nor the creature feel bad about what they're doing. The only thing that Lisa's worried about is that the police are going to catch up with her and that she's going to go to jail and that she has to lose her virginity before she goes to jail. And so at the end of the film, the way that she chooses to get out of this scenario is by taking her own life, unliving herself. Is that what I'm allowed to say on YouTube? Basically, she offs herself as a way to avoid the consequences of her behavior. So it just felt kind of like a cop-out ending. Like, I don't know, there's just something about it that feels really unsatisfying from a narrative standpoint. And I think it goes back to the thing that I was talking about earlier, where there's always like some sort of lesson that's usually learned. It's very rare that we see stories in which characters can just behave badly and then be rewarded for that at the end. I mean, maybe you could with a better story. I don't know. It's just like, I don't know. There's something about it that doesn't feel juicy, and I think that's because you're not actually seeing a character arc. There's not like an actual change. It's not like an actual like progression from the beginning of the story to the end of it. I mean, I guess like the only change for Lisa at the end is like she finds love with this guy and becomes a wife. That doesn't seem like a very feminist message for a so-called feminist film. I also felt like the scene in which Lisa is choosing to unalive herself, I felt like that was a bit glorified and I wasn't into it. Like just the way that it's presented as a kind of heroic act, like a heroic sacrifice, and you've got her like creature boyfriend that's like mourning her loss, and it's like weirdly like, I guess, trying to be romantic in a gothic sense. Because the way that she offs herself is by getting into this like tanning bed, and they like crank the temperature up all the way, and there's like a running joke in the film where the tanning bed like malfunctions, and so it electrocutes people. There's a thing where she's getting electrocuted by this tanning bed and it's going up in like flames. And I was like, okay, well maybe it's gonna be a thing where like she's gonna come out of this and she's gonna have, you know, like the Bride of Frankenstein like hairdo, and it'll be like fine, like she'll be a living dead, like her corpse guy, and then they'll just like run off together. And the ending was kind of like that, but not really. There's that weird last shot at the end where he's reading her poetry and she's just like laying on his lap, and she has like bandages all over herself, and then like she opens her eyes at one point and they're like red. I don't know if that was just from the fire. I don't know if she's a demon now. I don't really know what was going on there, but like, I don't know, the whole thing just felt really off. And as I was saying before, like they set up these threads throughout. You have a whole thing with her stepsister, and I actually really liked the relationship with the stepsister. She's actually a genuinely nice person. She wants to be friends with Lisa, and she's very fun and bubbly and upbeat, right? She's the completely mirror opposite of Lisa. So I thought that was nice, having these kind of duality of characters, where you have the stepsister that's like all about life, and then Lisa that's just like death and I hate everything. Like, I don't know if it needed to be a thing where it was the stepsister that dad ends up stopping Lisa, or at least getting Lisa to kind of recognize that her behavior is just not okay. You can't be going around killing people like that. But then there's also like a weird thing that it feels like they just throw in there in the third act, where you have the stepsister sleeping with the high school guy that Lisa has been having a crush on this whole film. And I don't really know like why that was happening. And then I was like, okay, well, are they gonna make the sister like a bad person? But then they don't, and she's like one of the few that comes out alive, and Lisa actually saves her from her creature boyfriend. So yeah, I thought that was all kind of weird. It doesn't feel like there's a genuine moment between them in the third act, and it feels like there should have been. There's also the father character, so it's a whole thing where you learn that Lisa's biological mother got killed by like a masked killer, because 1980s horror homage, so let's throw in a masked killer into this. So mom is dead, and that definitely put a strain on his relationship with Lisa. It's a whole thing. We've seen this before, where it's like dad gets remarried, you have the stepsister and the dad that are now becoming super close, and the dad is really only paying attention to like the stepsister and not Lisa. You know, he kind of ignores Lisa, doesn't really enjoy being around her. So it felt like there needed to be a thing at the end where they reconnect, and the dad kind of, you know, explains himself. I mean, I know, again, we've seen it before, but it felt like there needed to be something where the dad like comes to her and is like, look, I've been dealing with my own grief. You remind me of your mom, blah, 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 all that kind of cliched stuff. And yes, it would have been a cliche, but again, I feel like the film needed something like that, because dad is just like whatever throughout the whole movie. He doesn't really care when Lisa dies. He doesn't really care when his new wife dies. He doesn't really seem to care about his old wife dying. Like, I don't know if that was supposed to be a running joke in the film. I was like, is dad the killer? Is he the one that killed the mom? Because he's just acting strange the whole time. And I get it, he was supposed to be like stereotypical, out of touch 1980s dad. But again, it felt like there needed to be something. So yeah, the ending just fell off. There were a lot of ways that I could have seen it going, because I was thinking like, okay, this is a Frankenstein tale, so maybe the twist that they're gonna do on this is something where it's like the creature boyfriend, maybe he realizes that Lisa is the real monster here, because they do kind of set up a thing where Lisa's getting more confident the more that she kills people. And there are scenes where she's like talking down at him, like she's actually being really mean to her Frankenstein boyfriend and not caring about his feelings at all. And you can see him like kind of reacting to her and kind of being put off by some of her behavior. So I was like, okay, maybe the thing is like Lisa's the monster, and then, you know, zombie boyfriend has to stop her instead of her going into the tanning bed herself and having it be her choice. Maybe he just like throws her in there and then it sets on fire that way. Or I was thinking like maybe it would be a twist thing where it's like, you know, Lisa's set up as being someone that's like depressed and like hates life, but then through the course of, you know, interacting with Corpse Guy, she learns about love and she learns about like the values of life. So maybe that's like the twist. Like, I mean, this is kind of cheesy, but you know, instead of like creating life, she like reignites like the life within herself. She like realizes the joys of being alive and feeling things like love. But again, it's hard to give her like that good of an ending because she is spending so much of the film just being a bad person. And sure, you can make the argument that like the people that she kills, there's good reasons for it, right? There are people that like don't treat her well. At times it just starts to become like more petty the more that she does it. So it's hard to give her a good ending. So yeah, I feel like those are kind of all of my general thoughts on Lisa Frankenstein. Again, it started off really great, really high for most of the movie, really loved it. Just those last few minutes. I know people are saying that this is like instant cult classic. I'm a little bit hesitant to say that myself, mainly because I feel like actual cult classics, like the real cult classics, don't present themselves as being cult classics like right on the onset. I feel like that's a more natural progress that has to happen over time. So we'll see. We'll see if it does find its audience. Will I watch this film again? Maybe like the first hour. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think of Lisa Frankenstein. Did you like it? Did you not? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.